There it is right there. The weather blah.
The weather blah.
Not blog, just the weather blah.
That's how we feel. This is, for those that are wondering what the heck is this, that this is that Jeff and Matthew just blabbing. I think you call it weather blabbing. I don't know. I don't know whether we have to name this. We have to name this show because this is going to take over for when Polygon doesn't have guests, and we're going to continue to look for them. So don't think, oh my gosh, no more Polygon. And I have a thing because I was at my mom's house. My niece was over there. And I'm showing her, she's interested in weather. I think it's only because I'm around. So she's like, I'm going to draw a tornado, which, of course, she doesn't know what that is. And then I show her one, and she's like, is it going to blow stuff or whatever? And it's like, okay, whatever, and stuff like that. So then I show her stuff on radar. Okay, she's 6 years old. So I show her radar presentation of a tornadic storm, and the tornado is visible. It has the debris ball.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I show her 2 times, 2 different storms with radar presentation.
Okay.
One was Moore 99, Moore
Okay.
Oklahoma 99, and one was Moore Oklahoma 2013. So I showed her the 1999 radar presentation from KFOR. So if anybody wants to bitch about that, it's on YouTube. And I say, where's the tornado? And she points to the hail core and says, it's the purple part. Like, no. And then I pointed at it, and she's like, oh. So then I gave her the 2013 tornado. What does she point at? The debris ball. Which was correct. So it's like, and she learned that in 5 minutes. Why are there some people that still think the purple and dark area where the rain is where the tornado will be?
That's the thing. You took 5 minutes with that person face to face to enlighten them. Not many people get that.
Yeah, and so that's the first good topic for weather, whatever we're going to call this. Weather, whatever. That would be a good name for it too. But so, and as Matt feels kind of rotten and kind of black, it's hot. It's summer. And Matt had to work in the hot and the humidity. And he's blah.
Yes, like it's what, 5 or 7 something right now? It's 7:05 right now. I am making coffee. That's how blah I feel right now.
Yeah, given the fact that if it's blah and it's 7:05, it's actually 7:10 when we're doing this now. So that tells you it's really blah when he's 5 minutes behind.
Exactly. It's time for my caffeine to kick in and get me back on real time.
I'll say this because my mom's house has air conditioning. I was in there most of the day.
Good.
And the minute that I went outside after I ate dinner, because I ate dinner over there, and then came home, the minute I walked outside, it felt like whoosh, a warm front came in, which I went from inside to outside. The temperature was like 90. I could feel the humidity. It wasn't bad walking around, but like with working or even doing like lawn mowing and whatever stuff, I probably would be out like a light immediately where I'm just sweating and whatnot. And I mean, I feel for people that have to do roofing and any concrete work, paving, all that stuff would be just, gosh, god awful.
There was a moment in time today, probably roughly noon or 1 o'clock. You're basically peak heating of the day, where my shirt was so soaked with sweat that it was literally dripping onto my shorts that I was wearing, and the whole front of my shorts was completely soaked.
Yeah.
So much so that the color started bleeding out.
Well,
My shorts are now a slightly less darker shade of charcoal gray than they were when the day started.
Well, and there's your coffee pot.
Yes.
So you're going to drink hot coffee.
No. I'm going to put some ice cubes in it because there's no way I'm drinking regular temperature coffee.
You know what you should do? You should take it after it cools off a little bit, put it into ice cubes, and have it coffee ice cubes.
I've done that before.
Yeah. That'd be something you'd probably do, because that would probably be, and then put that in like other coffee. You'd have coffee ice cubes.
Hey, that's an idea. Instead of freezing the coffee, freeze some espresso and then put 2 ice cubes in the coffee.
We're coming up with weird stuff now. But we can, because this is what we'll just talk whatever. So, but I always think on a nice day, when I was at my mom's today, I drank lemonade because typically I drink pop. But this time of the year, it's getting to the time of the year that I tend to drink a lot more non-caffeinated stuff because caffeine does no good. It just makes you more thirsty.
Correct.
I tend to drink lemonade, especially when I go out and mow, which unfortunately this summer I don't have to because my mother got somebody else to do it.
Yay. Yay for you, for real.
Well, I would have still done it, but the person in question is doing it for a school thing to get like hours of time or something for doing like work for other people.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So it's like, well, at least it's going to a good cause. They're not just, but it sounds like they're like, well, he's only doing it for school. At least they're doing it.
Temporarily relinquishing that duty.
Only for mowing.
Right.
I still have to do. I had to, and I'll do this story because this kind of then relates back into this. I still have to do all this stuff because since my father passed away, a lot of stuff has had to be taken out of the house because my mother's pretty much cleaned out.
Oh yeah.
We had to get a dumpster, big open top dumpster.
Oh yeah.
So I, not this other person, my mother and I did that over a 2-day period. And luckily enough, it was not hot, but the day before he came and picked it up to take it away, it downpoured. So that added a bunch of weight. But, and I'm going to get back to this. I had to go out into the shed and take almost everything that needed to be dumped out. Everything had to be dumped. I did all that. There's some stuff that's going to be saved and whatnot. That's going to be, my mother's going to have a garage sale, a cheeky plug. Don't know when it is. And we're going to get rid of the rest of the stuff. And then we're just going to have the stuff that's still there. That's hers. And this goes back to a story that is involving weather. Back in 1995, what my parents had their roof replaced, which has since been replaced. It was replaced 2 years ago. And they had their driveway done.
Oh, okay.
Well, the roof that year was done on the day of the Oklahoma City bombing.
Really?
If anybody wants to know that. The driveway a little bit later. Anyway, 1995, the summer, my father says that he wants to put in a retaining wall. So we do that because we'd had a double driveway when we bought that house, and we did it to single, so then we had extra space, so we used that for a retaining wall. Well, now this is where it's going to get to the point of weather. We did the retaining. We had to bring in the dirt, we put the dirt in the backyard, and because there's an alley that goes back there, and we put the dirt back there, which was stupid. And then our retaining blocks were put back there. So I had to drag dirt and drag the retaining blocks to the front yard and help my father in the summer of 1995. Now, for those who wouldn't remember that, 1995 was a horrendously humid summer.
I remember that summer very, very, very well.
The heat indices that summer were almost over 110 for quite a bit of the month of July. July was when we did the retaining wall. let's just say that luckily enough for me, I was 14, that I sweated really badly that summer. The thing I got out of it, we then took a trip to Mount Rushmore that summer.
Nice.
And that brought up another weather story because I got to see what I would consider orographic lifting for the first time. I actually saw thunderstorms get formed in the Black Hills.
Oh, cool.
And I saw a hailstorm that lasted for over an hour and a half, and saw flooding, and I saw lightning hit a building and start it on fire. So I saw,
Jeez.
and that was all that summer. I saw everything. It was just kind of amazing. So I know it all came back to that, but when you were talking about having to work in this weather, it made me think of that, because I know we're like talking, it was like 92, 93, heat and DC was like 100. And it's like, that's summer. So, and then some places that's like daily for like 3 months, especially in the South. But
You would think that, okay, yeah, I am a pretty big fan of heat. I like hot weather, but some stuff like this just does not sit well with me. Like the humidity just hits me every time. Like, put me in the desert when it's 120, I am fine.
you know, but then there's a
Put me
different.
in an area around here where the dew point's pushing 70, I'm just a big baby. I was griping and grumbling all day to myself working today. It was kind of bad.
Well, the problem is that, especially, it's similar to when we get our first snow of the year. People aren't used to it, and it tends to be the worst on the first day that it's really hot. And this would be considered this. We've had temperatures only a few degrees cooler than this earlier in the year, but it was never this humid.
No,
It's
nowhere even
always
close.
the first real hot, humid, lazy dog day of summer that people complain the most. By the time, if it's like this come August, people are used to it, but then they're wondering, when is it going to get colder again? So I don't know. And then we could go running off on everybody's describing heat tips. Weather Brains' favorite thing to do in the summer is hearing about heat tips. Like,
Just for that reason, I am probably Matthew Shelley's #1 fan.
well, that's Kevin's son, or Kevin Sully's son, for those that wouldn't know that. And Kevin works at KFDX in Wichita Falls, Texas.
And is also a co-host of Weather Braids. And him and his son have a very, very, very good sense of humor, especially when it comes to things like this.
Yeah, like, I like, it's like going in an air-conditioned room. Well, no, I think I'm going to go in a sauna. Drink plenty of water. No, I think I'm going to drink beer, because they say alcohol is just as bad as pop or anything else.
Or I'm going to drink 3 Monster Energy drinks.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean,
I'm
going to work until I
was drinking one of
feel
those.
over. I'm going to be in the baking hot sun. I'm like, it's like, good.
That reminds me of something that happened today. We're talking about those monsters. There was a kid today that was working with us. Granted, he's only 17. He's working with us for the summer and stuff. He already has his own business, and he just does this concrete work for extra money on the side. But he was drinking a Monster today, and it was one of those mega Monster cans, so it was a really big one.
Yeah.
And he downed that in about 2.5 seconds flat, and about a half hour later, you hear him just, I'm so exhausted.
Yeah, you just can't.
I walked over and I grabbed my 2 big bottles of water, and I handed him one. And I said, "Drink up. and get back to work.
And you probably should have said something about drink up, Buttercup, or some such thing. Mm-hmm.
I thought about it, but I didn't want to torment him too much. It was only his 4th day with us.
Yeah, he'll learn maybe. So
I told him you shouldn't really drink those when it's this hot, and he goes, "Oh, I usually don't, but when I really want to pick me up, I drink one of these." And I said, "You picked the wrong day to have one of those."
yeah, it's just these are the days that you got gosh darn love air conditioning, but people who work that work really hard outside, you almost need to take constant breaks. And I could just imagine productivity does drop a bit.
Not with us.
Well,
Not with us. It's go. I took 1 10-minute break all day today.
well, you're different. You're
That's everybody though. That was a 9-person crew.
Well, what were you actually doing today outside?
We were stripping forms. In other words, taking forms off of already poured concrete.
Okay.
Taking that apart. What else did we do? We did a whole lot of grading, or basically taking rock or sand or gravel and adjusting the height of the surface of the earth to match the depth of the concrete that you're trying to pour.
Yeah. So.
And you can only do so much with a machine because we had a skid loader there with a bucket on it.
No.
And they can only do so much, especially in tight quarters. We were doing today what our big project was at Wright Middle School in Cedar Rapids, and excuse me, and we're laying out a big bunch of sidewalk and a bunch of curb, and it's really tight space in there, and there's only certain places where the skid loader can get in and dump rock and stuff. The rest you got to do by hand, and that was the worst part.
Yeah.
Was doing on that manual grading with a rake, and it kills you every time.
Okay, I'm going to ask this because this would be a purposeful question. I know the temperature, the lowest temperature of when concrete shouldn't be poured, roughly about 50, before you have to then put blankets and heat it up.
Actually, that's incorrect.
Well,
we poured concrete at the new Hy-Vee gas station in Coralville last winter during Christmas time at roughly
there was no
20 degrees.
There was no snow on the ground at the time.
No.
Because I always had known that it was like in the 50s or 40s, and for sure you couldn't do it after, well, of course, during snow. Because when snow hits, that's the end. But you have to keep it warm because it has to stay at a certain temperature or it could crack.
That is correct. That is correct.
Thank you.
That threshold, I think, is
50 or 45.
40 something, yeah. 40 something. I know that I was told it once, but I just can't recollect it.
Now, my question is, what's the upper limit? Where it starts to boil and then you have air bubbles. And then you have concrete, because I only mention this because I've seen several pictures of the last 2 days where I've seen concrete exploded on roadways, which happens quite often in the summertime, especially up here.
Well, concrete exploding is a combination of two things. A, it's the heat, yes, because concrete breathes just like anything else does. It expands and contracts with the temperature. But what usually happens with concrete that blows up, say on a roadway, it's usually at some sort of joint that wasn't properly expanded when it was poured. In other words, there wasn't rebar put in underneath it at just the right place, or there wasn't any sort of expansion joint. Like when you butt up against some existing concrete, you have to put some sort of barrier there to let the concrete expand and contract. And usually what winds up happening is that since can't pour roads in one giant long, 1,000-mile continuous stretch at one time. They have to stop, and then they have to go again.
Yeah, especially from what I would know, typically at the end of a workday when they've stopped and then start again. That's typically where the concrete is the weakest, correct?
Correct. And usually, if people are in a hurry, or they're new people like me that don't really know what to really look for on your own, sometimes that expansion joint isn't inserted, and that will cause it.
Yeah, because you can tell driving, especially on newer roads, you can almost tell where they stopped for the day. It's almost,
Yeah, there's usually a little bump.
or the pavement may be slightly different color, even if it's been many years. You can tell.
Oh yeah.
Because I can tell on that with 151 between here in Anamosa and Cedar Rapids. That road's been 4 lanes now since the late 90s.
Oh yeah.
You can easily tell where it kind of changed. And of course, I still remember, it makes me go back to the days. I remember when it was still a 2-lane road. And where the road used to go, because the old portions of the old road on 151 between here and Cedar Rapids are still the old road, where they just used that because they didn't want to have to just pave new pieces. But I can tell how it's bad when the part between Springville and Cedar Rapids was opened in 1991, and I actually still remember what the old road used to look like.
Wow.
That's sad. It's like, I remember it was 25 years ago.
Yeah. I feel old now.
I remember, you youngins. But
back to the original question.
Concrete.
I really don't know what would be the maximum limit. I know that one of our foremen spent a lot of time in Arizona doing concrete. Like, I want to say he spent 4 or 5 years down there.
Yeah, I wonder.
And he never.
I wonder if it's not a temperature thing. If it's not temperature as in the actual temperature, that it isn't the apparent temperature, or say heat index.
Well, apparent temperature might play a part, because as concrete cures, it generates its own heat. There's a chemical reaction that causes the hardening, and one of the byproducts of
if it's too
that
humid,
hardening
it takes
is
longer.
a small amount of heat.
Yeah.
And if you're pouring, say it's 125 degrees, and you don't have the right balance of chemicals, because that's what I think happens. And this is some of the stuff that I have yet to really learn really well, is like the chemistry of concrete, and what mixes you put, or what ingredients you put in what ratios at what times.
Yeah.
If you don't have the right ratio of chemicals, like if you have too much calcium on a really, really hot day, that stuff's going to blow up in a couple days, because it's going to cure really, really fast. It's going to generate a lot of heat. And you have a day like this, or like tomorrow, where it's supposed to be in the upper 90s, that stuff's going to crack and go, even if it was properly expanded, just because there's so much heat generated there.
Yeah, that's why you almost have to because it's like, I remember, it's like days on like this that as they're curing it, they like pour water on it to kind of cool it off.
That used to be a thing.
Yeah.
Right when it would just get hard enough to support water, where none of the sand on top would flake off, or what they call sealing it. Right after it got sealed, they would just take a water hose and just spray it down. My grandpa was a concrete finisher for 35 years in the Quad Cities, and he told me stories about that all the time, where it gets so hot that they didn't have the technology then to really fine tune the chemical balance the way we can now.
Oh.
So if they found out that they got a batch that was a little too hot, as he called it, it was a hot batch, they'd seal it, they'd start to finish it, and as they're starting to finish it, just as it's getting hard, they would spray water on it to cool it down.
Yeah.
That would knock it down a little bit. That'd make it a little bit more malleable for them to be able to manipulate the surface to properly finish it, and it wouldn't expand and boil off all the air and cause it to blow up in the process.
Yeah. I've seen it recently, maybe upwards of maybe 5-10 years ago, that they still do it, I think, for certain things. But other than that, I think they just would do it like you say, that they would know better. But I wonder if some, say, people that have been around the block still do it just as a precaution. I don't know.
Well, what we do, we still do something similar to that to this day. Instead of wetting down the concrete, we'll wet down the grade underneath the concrete. What we're gonna pour onto, we'll wet that down. That'll knock down
that might be what I think I see lately now is what they do.
Yeah.
That. Yeah. Like they do that around, let's say, like around the bottom, the base of
Yeah,
it.
they call it
and
the
then-
grade.
Yeah.
That's what that's called, the grade.
The base, yeah, whatever. I know. But anyway. So, but yeah, I was always, because I always knew roughly what about cold weather, but then hot weather with a lot of stuff. Oh, and then, and I mentioned this on the Polygon show back a few weeks ago about when I went to the cemetery and I had asphalt, the tar that got onto my shoes.
Yes.
And asphalt. I'll say this, and this is, I don't know what it is about me, because I always think about this. Black asphalt is the worst smelling in hot weather, because you think concrete is bad, and I know you know this, but asphalt is even worse in the summer because that thing is black, and black just is like a heat. It wants to just emit heat everywhere.
Yeah.
It is the worst. I don't like the stuff. That should be outlawed in the summer from doing summer stuff. Oh, it's horrid.
And that is one of the biggest contributors to the urban heat island effect is asphalt.
Yeah.
Sun comes up, heats up black asphalt.
Don't tell that, because we might be sponsored by them. We're not.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, the thing is, and this goes back. Adventureland in Des Moines, outside Des Moines, has black asphalt everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Every time I go to a parking lot, an asphalt parking lot, I get out of the car and I can smell it even on a decent day. Like if it's 70 degrees outside, I can smell the asphalt, and the first thing that comes to mind is Adventureland. And I always told my mother, or when my father was still alive, oh, it smells like Adventureland. And you can smell it easily on a day when it's sunny and a day where it has rained, because that's when the smell of it comes up, is after a rain, or especially when it's sunny and on a hot day.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know what it is. Asphalt. And then the same thing happened when I was at the cemetery a couple weeks ago when I had the tar on a sunny day, and it wasn't hot. It was decent, maybe like about 75, 80. That tar just immediately just liquefies onto any shoes, and that was just annoying. My shoes still stick a little bit when I walk.
The reason for that is the rubber that's inside of it. There's a little bit of rubber that goes into asphalt, and since you're a racing fan, you might understand this. That's what gives asphalt that tackiness when it's first laid down.
Tar, because it was the tar that was melted, which
has tar combined with the rubber.
Yeah,
part of what makes tar is oil and rubber. You
Yeah.
liquefy it, put some rock in it, bam, you have asphalt. But when it's freshly laid, right after it's laid,
yeah,
that's what gives it that tackiness. Is the rubber in there starting to solidify just a little bit more, and it starts to get tacky like a tire.
yeah.
It starts to get kind of, I call it tacky. It's like sticky almost.
Yeah.
And they do that at drag strips, only instead of instead of asphalt, because at drag strips they actually like concrete racing surfaces more than asphalt racing surfaces, just because it's able to hold more rubber.
No.
And what they do with that is that they'll take a chemical compound called VHT. If you ever hear, or if you're ever at a drag strip and you see those big 55-gallon drums that are used as trash cans, that say either VHT or JP1, that's traction compound. It's a spray compound. It's basically man-made tree syrup. And what they do is they spray that down on the racing surface, and that causes the molecules of the rubber that's been laid down during burnouts and stuff like that to automatically self-level. It loosens it up just enough where it can self-level, and it will make, and since there's an adhesive part to that chemical compound, it will also basically create a really sticky surface right on top of that rubber. So not only is the rubber laying down nice and flat, which makes the track automatically that much more sticky, there's also that little bit of glue now that's on the racing surface, which makes it that much more sticky. And when you walk on it, you have to be careful if you're wearing open-toed shoes, otherwise you're going to lose them. And I have done that before. I've been wearing flip-flops on a drag strip before, like at the starting line where the rubber is the thickest and where the most of that traction compound is laid down.
Yeah.
And I have broken and B, lost shoes just from walking on that surface.
Yikes. I hope you learned your lesson.
Yes, I now walk onto drag strips now with fully constructed shoes. Usually I'm in boots, because if I'm on the
Steel toe?
starting line, not usually, just because there's very little risk of toe impacts. I mean, yeah, you can get run over, but if you have a 3,000-pound car that's running over your toe directly, well, what it's going to do is it's going to smash that little cup of steel that's on your toe. It's going to smash it down and cut your toes off. So
thank you. That makes me feel better.
And in order to prevent that, I usually just wear like my old army boots or something like that, or I'll actually wear racing shoes, like what drivers wear underneath all their fire protection. They have actual driving shoes that have a really, really thick, meaty sole, but they're really light on top, so they're light to walk in. They feel comfortable, but they'll stand up to all that abuse on the starting line.
Yeah. I'm glad we transferred this back to racing again somehow, but
well, we're both racing fans.
Yeah. And so
that reminds me, we need to do a Polygon. I have a couple of ideas of people that I think we need to get on the actual Polygon show.
Yeah.
That can talk racing and weather. And I'll just go ahead and suggest them now and you can give me your opinion, either yay, nay, or I don't know. There's a guy that works for John Force Racing. His name is Lanny McGlizzy, and he's basically John Force Racing's track specialist.
Oh, that might be interesting.
It's his only job is to measure and track the stickiness, basically, or the traction of every racing surface that one of the John Force Racing cars makes a pass on.
So for both lanes.
For whatever lane that
both lanes
are happening.
And that between rounds, like before the first, and then if they keep going, et cetera, and during their qualifying.
During qualifying, especially during qualifying.
Yeah, to get your seed. Yeah.
the way he actually does it, the way that I've seen him do it, is that he'll come out usually when the last of the sportsman cars are running, right before the pros start, because either in qualifying or on race day on Monday if you're in Indy, there's a set order of what classes run, and it's usually the same at every race. You'll start with all your sportsman classes. You'll start with like super street, which is the 1090 class, and then super stock, and then comp eliminator, and then you'll go into the pro sportsman, and I'm saying this in air quotes, pro sportsman categories, which are like top sportsman, top dragster, top alcohol funny car, and top alcohol dragster. Right as those guys are starting to come onto the track, you'll see him come onto the track and start keeping track of it. And he'll look at the weather. He'll look at cloud cover, sunshine. He has 3 different temp guns taped together, where he'll take temperature measurements and then average those 3 out, because there's apparently a fairly large margin of error between manufacturers and stuff, and between guns rather, because all they use is a laser beam to measure the temperature. But he'll measure temperature, and there's actually a device that measures grip.
Yeah.
And if memory serves, and if we have him on, he might have to correct me, but if memory serves, he actually helped develop this device. It's called a gripometer. I know, very creative, right? It's called the gripometer, and all it is basically an industrial suction cup underneath a mounting plate, and through the mounting plate is the suction cup is attached to a torque wrench, and on the torque wrench there's a large dial gauge that measures the amount of grip. And what he'll do is he'll place it down the mounting bracket that makes up most of the body of the gripometer, is made in kind of like an oblong eye shape. Like if you're looking at it sideways, it almost looks like an eye. It's like a wide part in the middle, and then parts coming out on both sides. And what he'll do is he'll place it on the racing surface wherever he wants it to be, and then he'll put his feet on those longer parts, and then turn the torque wrench. And the level of grip that you have is the very point where the suction cup gets lifted up off the racing surface. That's your maximum mechanical grip.
And they'd probably need it on not just drag strips, they probably need it on regular race trucks too.
I've actually never seen
especially for tire suppliers. Like, for example, like NASCAR with Goodyear, or even in Formula One with Pirelli, because that sounds like something that Pirelli would do, especially in Formula One with all the 6,000 different tires they got now.
Well, I've never seen that device used anywhere but a drag strip, and it's a fairly new thing. It's only been around for a couple of years.
Yeah, that sounds like something that would need to be done in just all forms of racing, because comparatively speaking, because you need grip to go around corners in like road courses, especially like sports car racing or Formula One or like Le Mans or something, because 24 Hours of Le Mans is coming up, isn't it?
Right.
It's next weekend. Yes, it is.
Yes, sir.
Because it's the same weekend as the Formula One races in Azerbaijan. Let's just say some people are not happy about that. So, yeah.
I agree.
So, yeah, that... because this week Formula One's in Canada, NASCAR's in Michigan. Are they drag racing? NHRA, IHRA, anybody?
This weekend, the NHRA is in Englishtown, New Jersey.
Okay.
For the Summer Nationals.
Yeah, and it's going to be boiling.
No, it's not.
They're expecting
Well, right now, as a matter of fact, they're probably starting the second round of professional qualifying as we speak. Let's see what time. Yeah, 7:40. Yeah, no, they're probably halfway through the second round of professional qualifying for today.
Yeah.
tonight they are expecting world record performances because the air is that good.
Yeah, they're
It's
the only
nice and
place
cool.
they're the only place in the country that's not baking. So
Yeah, it's nice and cool.
they're
It's
expecting
dry.
they're expecting bad weather over there tomorrow because there is a
Yes.
severe weather risk tomorrow. So
Yes, that is true. And that's something that all the crew chiefs and all the tuners are all looking at right now. I guarantee you that's the last thing, or that's the second thing in their mind other than what they're doing tonight. But I forgot where I was going with that. I apologize.
well, surprise, surprise.
It's too hot.
But then, as you can see, it ain't gonna stay that way.
Yes, I see that. I know what I was going to say. I'm not sure that the gripometer would serve other forms of motorsports like Formula One or NASCAR or others as well as it does in drag racing, because you don't have nearly as much of a buildup of rubber, red as grip,
Well,
grip, and on those racing surfaces, especially on like street courses with Indy cars. There's not much rubber buildup, and that's usually counteracted by some sort of oil from all the street cars running on it all the time.
well,
So
the thing I was making a mention of is a lot of sports car races. For example, if you were looking at, say, well, like Formula One race this weekend's in Canada,
right,
Montreal, and that's in a park setting, which is actually you can drive on it all the time. But
right.
and then Azerbaijan, where the next week's race is another street course, a racetrack they've never been to. But talking about a place, let's say, like, for example, we'll just use Silverstone, where the British Grand Prix will be next month.
Right.
In a typical race, Formula One or anything, it's not just, one class, that's it. For example, in Formula One at Silverstone, there will be the GP2 series, GP3, the Porsche Super Cup will be there. So you're having multiple cars, multiple classes, multiple tire companies, because I don't think Porsche Super Cup uses Pirellis. I think they might use Continentals, but I don't know. So you're having all this tire buildup. So by Sunday, there's tire buildup everywhere. So that's where it's like it might be similar, something usable, especially on Sunday when racing is, especially with Formula One, is very important. So there's a lot of tire, unless it rains. Then it washes everything off, similar to like NASCAR. It's not like there. It's like Sunday racing. It's like that. Okay, so there was like no racing on Friday and Saturday because you had all this practice, all this qualifying, all this stuff, and of course every NASCAR race has the Xfinity series. It seems like, or the Truck Series, and so they're building up tire things. That's why, especially at a place like Dover, where the track is pure white at the beginning of the weekend, and then by Sunday it's like black, and there's tire rubber everywhere. That would be what it would be usable then at certain racetracks, but not all of them. And that, of course, with Dover's concrete. So there's a difference between concrete and asphalt. So
I'm still not exactly sure if that would really benefit, because in the other than drag racing forms of motorsports, you can compensate for your lack of mechanical grip with aerodynamic grip. You can tweak, like in Formula One, you can tweak every aerodynamic surface on that car. Every part of that car can be tuned or tweaked in order to generate the aerodynamics that the lead engineer wants for that particular track, that particular day.
At the particular temperature and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Exactly. So they can. So if they're lacking a little bit on mechanical grip, they can adjust that with aerodynamic grip. And the reason why I think it's so crucial in drag racing is because even when you have a NASCAR race, like I'll throw out an extreme, the Bristol night race. All three NASCAR series are there. They're running constantly all weekend. You have the Camping World Truck Series, you have the Xfinity Series, and then the Cup race.
Yeah,
that's a short track, high banks, pretty high speeds for such a short
Yeah,
track. There's tires flung everywhere. Now, this is just a guess because I've never been out to physically measure, but I would guess that the thickness of rubber on the Bristol track on Sunday afternoon, right after the checkered flag flies, compared to a Saturday afternoon that's just qualifying
at any drag strip.
At an NHRA drag race, if you compare the thicknesses, I would venture to say, with pretty good faith, that the thickness of the rubber on the drag strip is about 10 times thicker.
Yeah, at
least
where they need to go. Yeah,
correct.
I just think that a grip thing would probably be of some significance. It may have to be tweaked for other forms. But
now, if they tweak it around and they use it to measure tires, that would be something. Because then you could find out without even testing a tire, okay, this compound's not so great. Okay, this compound's really good, so we're gonna have to watch tire wear.
That's where tire compounds. Now of course we're flying off of weather, but it is weather somewhat related because certain compounds will not work in hot weather. For example, I'm going to use this. I think is good for all forms of motorsport outside of drag racing, and maybe even for drag racing. Any soft compound will not work in warm weather or hot weather because it'll blister. And the last thing, especially in drag racing, where you need the wheels to really grip the torque to get it to go down the quarter mile, 1,000 feet, etc., whatever, you don't want tires to be ripping apart and blistering everywhere as you're trying to go, and all you're doing is spinning your wheels going nowhere because you're just ruining the tires and everything's going away.
Actually, you just brought up an interesting point, and I don't think you even really intended to.
Oh, great. More excitement. I'm causing trouble.
I'm thinking back to now, mind you, I'm thinking more towards Top Fuel because they're the kings of the sport. They're the fastest. Well, they were the fastest up until last week when Matt Hagan in a funny car ran 335 miles an hour, which is 2 miles an hour faster than any other Top Fuel dragster on the planet officially, because Doug Coletta like 9 years ago ran 337 at Las Vegas, which is an altitude track. Figure that one out. But anyways,
surprise, the air is thinner, so you go faster.
No, the air is thinner, less horsepower you can make as well.
But then in turn, you also can go through the air faster because it's thinner. So in turn, yeah, less horsepower, but you can still go faster. Yeah,
maybe.
Because that's why, and I'm sorry to interrupt. That's why there's more home runs at Coors Field in Denver than any other ballpark because of the height, the elevation, because the ball travels better because it's thinner. So the same goes for cars and anything else because it's higher up, even though it's not. We're not talking to like that we've ever seen drag strips at a mile up and up.
There is a drag strip a mile up. There's a drag strip in Denver. It's called Vandermeer Speedway, and NHRA races there every year.
Yeah, so that would be one that, depending on what the temperature is, comparatively speaking, that's something.
Almost across the board, just because of elevation alone, you'll see at elapsed times when they travel to that track, you'll see elapsed times drop at least 0.3 of a second on average, just because of the altitude difference.
Yeah.
So, but what I was thinking about was all the massive tire failures that have happened, rear tire failures. You know, the drive tire, the tire that is being powered by the engine. All the really significant failures. There's one that comes to mind with a driver by the name of Mike Dunn. At the time, he was in a car sponsored by the New York Yankees, whose trailer is sitting in my team owner's garage right now. He owns that trailer now. That transporter, the truck and trailer that hauled that car around, he now owns it. But he had a pretty massive tire failure. This is probably 15 plus years ago, where the tire shredded off. And because the tires are so tall, and because he was already going so fast, he was already doing almost 300 miles an hour at the time of the tire failure. The tires like stood up and it took off the back wing. It sheared it right off. And that caused him to lose all aerodynamic control of the car. He lost control and he just skidded down the shutdown area at 290 miles an hour until he just ground to a halt. But there have been others, not really recently, because I think tire technology's really caught up and they're paying close attention to it. But there have been a string of tire failures just like that, and most of them happen in the deepest of the summer months, July, August.
Yeah.
So I wonder if all those failures are related to heat, because not only are you racing in an environment like this where it's really hot and humid, but the process of doing the burnout and staging the car and then making the actual run, especially in a top fuel dragster, has to generate tons and tons of heat internally on that tire. I've never taken a temp gun to a tire right after it does a burnout, so I don't really know what the numbers are. But
probably outrageous.
I could only imagine just how hot that tire gets right at the point that it's contacting the racing surface while it's on a run, because there's a lot of torque there. There's friction. There's tons of friction. I mean, we're talking 11,000 plus horsepower at this point now.
Yeah.
You can only imagine the kind of heat that's built up at that very precise point. It makes me wonder, I don't know about anybody else, but it makes me wonder if any of those tire failures in the past weren't because of heat, basically a heat failure.
Well, the thing that I've noticed, and this goes back to, and I could think about, because there's several instances in racing, not just drag racing, where about tire problems. There was a NASCAR race at Indianapolis a couple years ago where the tires kept blowing every 10 laps. And the race was a disaster, and that was caused due to too many blisters and stuff. Now it's, I think, a heat-related issue for Goodyear.
I remember that well.
There's been several instances of races in Formula One with Pirelli at Silverstone a couple years ago. They had tires blowing up everywhere. I don't think that was heat-related. I think that was a compound problem.
I think Indianapolis also, the NASCAR race in Indianapolis, I think that was a compound problem too.
Yeah, but it was related, and then there was a heat. It was a heat thing because, and then this brings up a point. 1992, the Indianapolis 500, 1992. For those that wouldn't know the 92 race, of course, Al Unser Jr. won that race. It was his first Indy 500 win. That race was marred by having, now this is the opposite, tires that were too cold because it was too cold and the tires couldn't adhere and people were spinning out and crashing. They
couldn't build heat.
There was more crashing from it took that race, which is on YouTube. I watch it constantly sometimes. That race, if you go from the second, I think it was the third caution, which to they couldn't even get under green. They'd get the green flag and somebody'd crash. And they did like 50 laps and it took like an hour and a half to do.
Wow.
Because there were so many cautions. And the funny thing was they got to the halfway point in the 92 race at 100 laps. They had run half of the laps under caution and half under green. The average speed at the time had dropped to under 120 miles an hour. This was IndyCar.
Wow.
Let's make a mention. 120 miles per hour average speed for a 500. Now, of course, this wasn't at the halfway. It was just at halfway. Was the average speed of the winning time in like the 40s. And this was 92. when the qualifying speed was 230, 232, and they're like doing the average speeds at 120 because everybody's wrecking.
Literally half
And that
of
was
qualifying speed.
yeah, and that was mainly due to the opposite. It was too cold, and the tires were too soft. Or no, the tires were too hard because Goodyear that year had brought harder tires because they thought it was going to be hot. Because as you know, in May in Indianapolis, it tends to be warm. And you don't want soft tires because those blister. But they did hard tires. Well, then the temperature ended up being the coldest Indianapolis 500 ever. It was in the low 50s, and it was cloudy. There was no adhesion. There was no adhesion. People are spinning out. So
the only things that would be making grip, the only tires that would be making grip in those conditions would be like a dirt track tire. But they would make grip, and you'd have decent times and decent speeds, but you'd have to change them every 20 laps.
Yeah, you can't
just wear out and flake.
Yeah, the thing is in hindsight, any tire supplier has to take a risk because you don't know what the weather's going to be like. If they knew, well, the weather's going to be XXYZ or whatever, because tire suppliers can't just say, well, it's Thursday, the race is on Sunday, we'll make tires now. That's not how it works. You have to make the tires weeks and months in advance. And you have to just guess what compounds you're going to use, especially for Formula One or even sports cars and whatnot. NASCAR, I think they just pretty much take a middle of the road type thing because I never hear of NASCAR talking about, well, these tires are, you always hear them talk about compounds, but you never hear them say, this is the soft tire, this is the hard tire, because NASCAR hasn't gotten to that yet. I'm wondering when that's coming. They're the only thing that I know of outside of drag racing that doesn't have like different compounds of tire, because I think they're afraid that they don't want to get themselves into that mess. And I
do know that the processes and the actual makeup of the tire between a NASCAR tire and, let's say, a top fuel dragster tire are completely different. The only similarities are that they're black and they're round, and that is it.
Yeah,
that's the only two similarities between a NASCAR tire and a professional drag racing tire. They're designed to do completely different things, and therefore they are engineered to complete different tasks.
Yeah.
A NASCAR tire, the sidewall has to be extremely stiff to be able to hold the car up during cornering. A drag racing tire, the sidewalls on a drag racing tire, and this is on a top fuel dragster tire, so imagine 11,000 horsepower going through this at this moment, are only 2.5 millimeters thick. The sidewall it's only 2.5 millimeters thick, because what they're trying to get the sidewall to do is at the launch, they're trying to get that sidewall to basically wrinkle.
Yeah.
And what that does, when you get two tires that are 17 inches wide, mind you, and the bias height, or basically the height or the distance between the rim and the top of the tire, is something like 6.5 inches. What that does is that causes the car at the initial hit of the throttle, what that causes the car to do is essentially squat. So it affects the weight, A, the weight transfer of the car, and B, it effectively increases the width of each tire by 1.5 inches. So instead of a 17-inch tire at rest, you now have an 18.5-inch tire at rest. What that also does, since it's a little wider, it actually creates a little bit of a gear ratio effect. It'll actually slow the engine down just that little bit, helping that car accelerate through that first 100 feet, which is the most crucial part of the run, because that's where most tire smoke, or where most cars spin the tires when they overpower or underpower the track.
Oh.
That's what they're trying to do. So what Goodyear has done, and they've done this for decades. This is no secret. But what they've done is that they make that sidewall really, really, really thin, causes that whole tire or that whole car to squat down. It'll slow down the engine revs just a little bit, which kind of helps keep the power at bay just a little bit, just that little tiny bit. It's probably on the scale of maybe 50 to 100 horsepower, which for a street car, that's a huge deal. But for a top fuel dragster that's making 11,000, 50 or 100 horsepower is nothing.
Yeah.
You can turn one screw about 1/8 of a turn and add or take away that much power. It is not that big of a deal to gain or lose 50 or 100 horsepower in that setup. Now, an NASCAR tire, if those sidewalls were that thin and wrinkled like that, they wouldn't even last a half a lap. So there's a lot of differences between the two, but the one thing that both have to take is heat, or the lack thereof. And where I think NASCAR is really lagging behind is they don't have the ability to take the absence of heat. They have great tires for hot tracks. They will grip and grip and grip and grip and grip all day long. Might have to change them more often, but they will grip and grip and grip all day long.
Mm.
Now, you get them in Bristol in June or July, whenever that race is, and all of a sudden a backdoor cold front comes in, drops temps into the mid 60s, and humidity plummets. Horsepower, or the ability to make horsepower, jumps. You'll probably make another 35 horsepower just by running an NASCAR engine in cooler air.
Yeah.
So not only that, but those tires, they're so hard, they can't build heat, they can't build friction, and therefore generate grip. And I think they're kind of failing miserably at it, because they don't have the wherewithal, I don't think, to look across the hallway and look at NHRA and seeing 24 classes of cars making runs down the drag strip with 10 times the horsepower and then some in cooler temperatures.
But it might be the fact that there's a difference between going straight and turning. I don't think there should be, but
I don't think there is so much. I mean, yes, that is a difference, believe me. But you can engineer a tire that can corner and generate grip that way, and yet still be able to grip in colder temperatures. Formula One does it all the time. SCCA does it all the time. The NHRA does it all the time. Granted, not with cornering, but I've seen cars with 2,000 horsepower make nice, clean, very respectable runs. Fast runs down the quarter mile when the air temperature is 45 degrees and the track temperature is only 60.
Yeah. So I'm glad we talked about tires for the last tires. So, but it is weather related, so it's not like, and it all came from you suggesting somebody. I don't remember who it was anymore.
Lanny McGlizzy.
Yeah, that was like a half an hour ago we talked about.
Right. His name's Lanny McGlizzy.
Yes, that was him.
And he's probably the closest person that I know that pays attention to the weather when it comes to racing, because weather plays a big factor. Well, him and the crew chiefs that he worked for that he works for, but there's no way I'm getting a Mike Naff or a Jimmy Prock on this show. I'm just not that cool. Sorry.
Yeah, you're not cool.
Yeah. I'm cool. I'm just not that cool. Although it would be great to get Jimmy Prock on just because he is such a wizard. And here's why. Really quickly, here's why he's such a wizard. Last year, around this time, actually a little bit before, it was about the end of May. The John Force Racing funny cars all of a sudden picked up like 500ths of a second in ET. Just seemingly to the untrained eye, just magically started going faster by 500ths of a second. In some cases, a tenth, which is a mile in drag racing.
Yeah.
And nobody could figure out why. And they were just winning everything. They were constantly going, setting low ET, top speed, this, that, blah, blah, blah. You know what he did? He changed the angle at which the exhaust headers came out of the car. He laid them back. Instead of having them more pointed up and down, they were laid back a little bit and kind of more aimed back as well as up.
Just a few degrees.
That's all he did. He laid back the header angle, and they picked up that much ET and speed. And that's all he did. And the funny thing is that all he wanted to do was see how much thrust they made.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, they make some very real thrust. There was an instance a few years ago with a guy who lives kind of around here. He's from Springfield, Illinois. His name's Tim Wilkerson.
Yeah.
He had a header, an entire bank of exhaust headers break off during a run.
Oops. Just
completely sever. And the thrust that was generated after that header left the body of the car actually lifted him off the ground.
Yep.
Granted, this is a 3,200-pound car.
Yep. Time to take off.
And it lifted that thing straight up off the ground. All four wheels, just like it was a vertical takeoff aircraft.
Yeah.
But I have one more suggestion. Here in a little bit. Because in the background I'm kind of talking to him as we speak. I'm trying to get him to come on one of these weeks, but we'll see. So stay tuned.
So evidently, yeah, we'll see. I'm still looking at storms. There's actually a warning near Spirit Lake right now, but
really
in Northwest Iowa, there's been warnings out there in Northwest Iowa for a while. The storms are approaching Waterloo right now. For those that'd be like, yeah, whatever. But so
interesting.
I was driving home back at 6 o'clock, and I could see like the cloudiness coming in. And I'm thinking, geez, I was like, really?
Yeah, sure. As the sun's going down, now we have it.
And I'm hearing screaming. So something exciting's happening.
It's my neighbors behind me. They're in their pool, and they're creating a ruckus.
Okay. I hope those aren't the people that we want to be on the show.
No. The person that I'm trying to get on is actually a photographer / journalist for the NHRA. His name's Martin Libhart. And he lives in Wichita, Kansas.
Okay. And you're talking to him like right now?
Yeah. Well, I've sent 2 messages. He's sent 1.
Yeah, and he's like, yeah, what?
I think he's busy editing because he just got back from a nostalgia race. Or no, he's on his way to a nostalgia race in Bowling Green, Kentucky right now.
Uh-huh.
So he's either on a plane or he's driving or something like that.
No, probably driving it'd make more sense.
But he's a very avid weather fan as well, and he actually knows quite a few storm chasers, and he's actually storm chased himself.
Okay, that now he does. He's that has to be the weirdest person. So I mean, yeah, I take pictures.
He's just like me. He's a huge
Well,
racing fan. He loves motorcycles, and he storm chases.
Well, yeah, so typical. I'm gonna drive my Harley to the tornado.
You know what? I put a picture up on Facebook when I first got my bike. When my wife first gave me my bike, and a friend of mine down in Alabama was like, "Is that rated to chase an EF4?" And I was like, no. Because the last thing you want to do is ride a motorcycle anywhere near a supercell thunderstorm, much less anywhere near a tornado. I think that sort of goes without saying, but you know.
Well,
I have never heard of anybody, now that I think of it, I have never heard of anybody at all that has ever been riding a motorcycle and looking at a tornado at the same time.
you want to be the first?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, here's how you do it. You put the motorcycle in the back of a van, you drive to the tornado, then you get the bike out of the van, put it on the road, get on it, sit, put on your helmet and stuff, take a picture and say, yay, tornado. Then you put the bike back in the van, tie it down, drive the van, drive away.
And I ride about 100 feet just to say that I actually rode.
Yeah, so see, you don't have to, I'm not saying ride clear down to the tornado. Just ride, let's put it in the back of a hauler or something and then take it out and then ride 100 feet and you're on, hey, tornado, then you take it back. So that'd be kind of stupid, but.
I think I'll still pass because by luck.
You crash before you get there.
It'd be that one storm that's throwing off like 4 3-body scatter spikes that's just got like grapefruit-sized hail everywhere.
Well,
and I would get hit by one.
Or it's a tornado that's deciding it wants to have lots of tornadoes. Storms that, for example, like Dodge City a couple of weeks ago, that storm was producing 15 or 20 tornadoes or something like that, something to that effect. Because I watched Val Castor's video of it because he posted it on his YouTube thing. Yes, I've tried to get Val on. Doesn't work. Anyway, and he's like, and here's tornado number 5 bazillion or whatever. And I'm thinking, oh, good night. Oh, and then he keeps talking to David, and I'm thinking, don't you dare tell me that David Payne is putting it on the air in Oklahoma City, that he's interrupting broadcasting to show a tornado in Kansas. The shocking thing is that he didn't, but Travis Meyer, who's been on the show before, did. And he's at their sister station in Tulsa. And he did show it on air in Tulsa because Tulsa had tornado warnings at the time in their market. Oklahoma City did not. So they
that's halfway justified.
Tornadoes in Kansas. And I was like, okay. And they were showing Val Castor's stream. I'm like, okay.
Well, that's halfway justified because he was already on air for warnings in his market. So he could say, this is the kind of environment that we might be looking at coming up here later. Here's this storm out in Kansas that's just producing tornado after tornado after tornado. So be careful.
Yeah. So he has the legitimate thing, but then I'm thinking, they're showing tornadoes in another state. So I'm thinking, so if we have severe weather in Iowa and there's severe weather coming in from, let's say, from the Northwest like it is right now, let's show, for example, and I could look it up, I'm not going to post it right now, that, there's storms coming. Let me talk about the tornado warning that just expired southwest of Green Bay. That's the type of activity we could see later.
Or the tornado warnings that have been not nonstop, but have been going on all day in Montana.
Oh yes, we need to worry about all that.
Yep.
There's let me see. There's none right now. There was a few late earlier, but there's a bunch of severe thunderstorm warnings up there now. There's actually 4 that I'm looking at right now.
There's one heck of a storm just east of Denton, Montana that looks like it's pretty nasty right now. It's got a nice little inflow notch and a hook echo going on it.
You know, I'm still looking. The storms that are coming this way, it's probably going to rain an hour from now. And it's now 25 after 8 as we're doing this or trying to finish this. So, but I'm hoping it's going to get cooler. I don't count on it. It's June. It'll get cooler.
I don't count on it.
It'll get cooler in September. That's about it.
Something to look forward to.
Yay! So,
well, it's time for me to wrap it up. I need to go and feed my wife.
Yeah, because either that or jump in the pool.
No thanks.
Yeah.
I'm done with water for today. I drink so much water today. I'm sick of it.
Yeah, you just don't like your neighbors.
They have some pretty epic campfires, so they might.
Oh, so they've started the neighborhood on fire.
Yeah, right.
So we're gonna wrap it up. So we're going to name the show whatever, I don't know.
The weather blah.
Weather blah. We'll come up with something better than that. Maybe we won't know.
Temporarily call the working title is the weather blah.
We may just call it the working title Weather Blah number 2 next week or whenever we do it, if we do another show.
Yeah.
Because we don't know if we're going to have a guest next week, because we may not. We never know. Just stay tuned and you'll find out. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.